Good morning. We're here at the Longevity Center in West Palm Beach. Gonna meet up with my friend and client Kyle, do some heavy metal chelation with him and his team. See you guys inside. What's up, dude? How are you, man?
Good.
Good to see you, bro. You look amazing, man. Hello, how's it going?
Carly.
Hi, Andres. Nice to meet you.
We're doing some.
Dude, you're a different human, bro. Since last time I saw you, man.
Brighter.
Yeah, bro. Your energy, your glow, your body comp. I mean, everything is. You're my specimen, bro.
That's
Incredible. Now this is the specimen.
There you go.
How's it going, man?
Good.
It's great to finally meet you.
Ben, Dr.
Andres.
K.
Yeah,
Nice
this
to meet
is Darwin.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah, scratching. I need it. Shirt off.
Yeah, well, let's talk for a second first.
Okay. Can I sit here?
Yeah, so we're at the same height. So what's going on with your back?
Get a little closer.
So, I think throughout all these years of lifting heavy weight and not listening to my parents, or if you're watching this, I should have listened to you guys a little more closely probably. All right, guys. Today we got done with 18 out of the 20-something heavy metals. We successfully chelated them, I believe. we took the heavy metals out of the tissues, and now my body's draining them, and I am feeling the side effects. I feel like absolute trash. It was almost impossible to drive back without falling asleep. I had to use a nicotine lozenge and like double espresso, and I was still falling asleep. We're gonna come back on Saturday to do mercury and arsenic, and I'll see you guys then. We're back in one of my favorite places on the planet, the Longevity Center, Florida. Today, we're gonna do a podcast all about heavy metal chelation while I'm hooked up to the Eboo that will hyperoxygenate, ozonate, filter, clean, purify my blood as they insert it from one arm into the other. Let's go have some fun. How are you?
I'm good. What, you moving in?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, no, I got the podcast set up.
Nice.
Yeah, nice to see you again. Hello, how are you?
Did you met her last time, right? This
Yes.
is my wife, Alexandra.
Yep, yeah, nice to see you guys
Hello.
again. Hey. Cool, well, dude, I feel like a new person, man.
That's good.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna put an IV into each of his arms. It's gonna run out of one arm through the machine and then back to his other arm. So it runs in a continuous circuit for an hour.
Stopped it right in its tracks.
It's not a good look when my patients leave here looking bloody. 3, 2, 1.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Can we show this on Instagram?
I don't know.
You could try.
All right, I think I have to do some breath work because this is just unbelievable.
Can you feel the plug in?
I feel something happening, man.
So you'll notice your other side's not plugged in yet. What
Yeah.
we do is I prime the entire machine first and then plug in your other side. Make sure
Okay.
there's no air bubbles.
Nice. What's the typical reaction you get from people when they do something like this
So
for the first time?
people that are already pretty healthy and well tuned, they start to feel better even halfway through the treatment. You start to feel almost lighter.
No, I mean like right away. Like when you hook someone
Oh.
up to this machine, what's the reaction? Because this is pretty wild.
Most of my patients have been here. I get very few people coming into Eboo for the first time.
Yeah.
Most of my patients have actually already been here doing chelation or other kinds of treatment. And so I have this thing, this machine runs 4 or 5 times a day.
Okay.
And so as long as you're in the IV room, you'll probably see it running. So most people are doing it because they see someone else doing it and they're like, wait, you feel better off that? I want to do that too.
And am I getting anyone else's blood going in my body?
Nope. So the entire thing is sterile, A to Z. It's all one-time use.
Yeah, cool.
So,
Very nice. And you built this machine?
So I didn't build it in the sense that I assembled it, but I figured out all the individual parts. There is a protocol that's been around for a long time that I based this off of, and I've kind of fine-tuned it with my own parts that I wanted.
You're a mad scientist, you know that?
I've heard that before about this.
Yeah. Like, I don't think anyone ever, like, as a kid growing up, you don't go, oh, you don't want to hook someone up to a machine that filters and cleans their blood and reinserts it into their body. It's kind of nuts, don't you think?
You know what's funny? A couple years before I started using it because I had a dream where I designed this machine.
Get out of here. You actually dreamt about this?
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what this is supposed to be. Somehow we're filtering the blood, but
Yeah.
right now your blood is still diluted with saline. It's starting to turn darker up here, but you're going to be able to see a massive color difference between what's coming out of you and what's returning to you, and that's because of the hyperoxygenation of the blood. So it's almost akin to venous blood, arterial blood,
Wow.
but this is all venous blood.
So this is like a secondary set of lungs we've got here.
Sort of, yeah. Okay.
I taste something.
You taste, it's plasticky tasting,
Yeah.
that's heparin.
That's what?
It's the heparin. We use a tiny bit of heparin in here, which it keeps the blood from clotting while it's running through all this plastic, and it has that nasty taste. It will go away in a couple minutes. You'll get used to
Are
it.
you injecting BPAs into your blood?
No, it's not. That's what's weird. It's heparin, derived from porcine or pig. It tastes like plastic. It's very weird.
Oh, he's pumping you full of microplastics.
I drove all this way just to get pumped with microplastics.
Okay, you want to start the podcast?
Yeah, let's do it. All right, so we're back here. I'm hooked up to the Eboo. We're in your wonderful medical facility in your office, Dr. K. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, you too. So Andreas is right now sitting across from me. He's got both his arms spread out in front of him. He's got IVs in both arms. Blood's coming out of one arm, going back into the other. It's running through this whole big fancy collection of tubes under the light. There's some pump happening. We're filtering his blood. We're reducing inflammation, running it under an ultraviolet light, and then back into his other arm.
Yeah. You're a mad scientist, you know that?
I've heard that before about this thing.
Yeah, this is just unbelievable, man. Wow. And I mean, you can start to see that's the color difference you were describing, right? Between the blood that's coming out and the blood that's going back in. So the blood that's coming back in seems to be a lot brighter, redder.
Hold it. Yeah.
So
it's hyperoxygenated.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. It's akin to taking venous blood and turning it into arterial blood. And then so basically what this does is it pumps in roughly 30% more oxygen per cell. And so we're just hyperoxygenating all of your tissue. And when we do that, we're able to bring oxygen to less oxygenated parts of your body, like your eyes, your hands, your feet, your kidneys, places that normally last in line for oxygen. We're now suddenly getting a ton more. So I've had patients tell me that they could even see better after doing this.
Wow, that's unbelievable. So it supports the entire body. I mean, it's a systemic benefit that you can derive from therapy like this. And something I think we forgot to do, maybe we can still do it, is a breath hold test before and after. Since I do a lot of freediving, spearfishing. In fact, I'm going to be doing a huge spearfishing trip next week, 50 to 70 miles off the coast of North Carolina for wahoo and mud and snapper and all kinds of fun stuff. But I'll tell you what, I think what's really cool is I'm very familiar with my bottom time, and using my dive watch to kind of reference that. So I will give you a before and after based on my dive watch data.
Yeah.
The Garmin data. So that should be really exciting.
That'd be very cool. We're adding some science to this.
Yeah, for sure. Make sure to let the audience know that this has probably been, not probably, without a doubt, this is one of the most important things I feel I've done for my health. I'm excited to see the objective data that proves this, but I can feel a difference. I already do, I'd imagine I do everything under the sun to feel great, look great, and live a long, healthy life. But this made a massive difference in my quality of life. Like, I feel like I had too many tabs open and I closed a bunch and then hit the refresh button. Like, I feel more refreshed internally. I feel just clearer, more energized.
That's amazing. Rarely we get patients that react to chelation as well as you do. That happens once in a while. And so like I was telling you earlier, unfortunately, if chelation was a one-shot treatment, it'd be the best thing in the world. Unfortunately, it's a series of treatments like I was telling you. And with each treatment you do, you pull out a little bit more heavy metals out of you each time you go. Yeah. And so the fact that you're reacting this well after having already done just one treatment is amazing.
Yeah. And I remember, I know you, and please, if you can elaborate on this specific subject and what happened. As soon as I got the chelation or the IV, within 30 minutes of getting that IV, I felt like absolute crap. And, driving back from West Palm to Miami, it's an hour and a half or so. Dude, I have never felt so exhausted in my life. and
Yeah.
it was almost impossible to drive back. For the first time in my life, I had to take caffeine and nicotine, and I had Andrew here asking me very complicated math problems just to keep myself awake, and I was slapping myself in the face. On top of that, I had to pull over halfway through to get more caffeine and nicotine, just to make it back home. You know, so what was happening there? Why did I get that kind of reaction? And is that typical when you do heavy metal chelation?
Yeah, so that reaction can be typical. What happens is, and the way I always explain to patients is, whatever symptom you get when you're doing chelation is kind of what that heavy metal is causing. So you got that really bad when we did your mercury treatment.
Yeah.
And so what happens is likely, you know, you mentioned you have a tiny bit of fatigue, and if you weren't as well tuned as you are with your supplements, your workouts, just your lifestyle, you'd probably be feeling it a lot more. So you're holding that fatigue at bay, just through how you live your life.
Right.
And so the average person that isn't like you, they probably have a ton more fatigue with these heavy metal loads that you have. And so the mercury's causing it. And when we do that chelation, we're basically stirring up a lot of that mercury, and it takes about 8 hours for you to pee it out. And so in that 8 hours, it's kind of passing through your body and ping-ponging around your body. And so it's just creating more fatigue, more inflammation for that 8-hour period.
Yeah, I felt, oh my gosh, I felt like I was unplugged, you know? And now, I mean, it's been what, like 2 weeks?
Yeah.
I feel so much better, man.
Nice. You're really high in some of them, and I'll show you that in a second, but you're deficient in molybdenum.
Wow.
And so that's what mercury does to you.
And it's interesting because I felt, over the past couple of years, I felt like a buildup of this, like, sulfur intolerance, you know?
Yeah.
And it's because the heavy metals, they bioaccumulate.
Yes.
You know? And so
Exactly.
it just gets worse and worse. I also felt this with red wine, you know? Like
Nitrates.
Nitrates and also the sulfites,
Yes.
right? And many red wines, they have added sulfites and sulfates to preserve the wine, but red wine naturally contains it anyway, a small amount. And I start to feel more and more sensitive to any wine that wasn't biodynamic.
Yeah.
You know, and that was an issue for me because I really enjoy red wine. You know,
Yeah.
I'll have it maybe once a month, but I'm a snob. Like, I get some good stuff, but even that, I wasn't having a good time drinking my red wine.
Yeah.
You know.
And so that's kind of what I was telling you. If you want to be able to drink red wine before you're done chelating, you can take molybdenum before and after, and it'll prevent a lot of those symptoms for you.
Yeah, for sure. So why don't you take me
Why don't we
through
dive in?
the data, man? Tell me how the levels are looking.
So as you remember, we did 2 different tests with 2 different chemicals, EDTA and DMPS. Arsenic somewhat, mercury is the key of that. So I'm going to swing around for a second. So you can see his pre-test, what he eliminates on his own versus what we're able to excrete out of him doing the chelation. And so you can see that giant line coming across the middle of the paper. That's his mercury levels. So now we're going to show Andreas the big reveal.
Oh my gosh.
So this is your pre-test. This is what you eliminate naturally on your own. Not much of anything,
Where's
right?
the mercury?
Mercury's right here.
So that's what I eliminate naturally
Yes.
on my own.
You're eliminating 1 microgram per gram of creatinine in your urine. Okay? Then this is what you eliminate with chelation. So
What?
45. So
it's off the charts.
It's off the charts.
It genuinely is off the charts.
it's off the charts. That's him.
Holy shit, dude. That is unbelievable.
So you're
That's
at
insane.
49. So you're 49 times higher elimination with chelation. And so what we do, so we can't measure how much mercury is inside of you. All we could do is measure how much we can pull out of you. So from there, we kind of extrapolate that. If you have 50 times as much coming out of you, then you have a massive burden inside of you.
Right.
And so each time you do chelation, you pull out more and more. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah, and so when people get their heavy metals tested, you know,
Yep.
is that an inaccurate or a poor way to assess what's really happening in someone's body?
So as we all know, tuna, swordfish, all the big game fish are full of mercury.
Yeah, because it
And-
bioaccumulates and biomagnifies as you move up the trophic levels in the food web.
Yep. And so it's basically genetics. Does your body recognize mercury and other metals as a toxin and choose to eliminate it, or does it not? For example, people of Japanese ethnicity, they have a gene that actually identifies elemental mercury as a toxin and excretes it at a faster
Wow.
rate than the rest of us.
Wow.
Because they, as a culture, they eat so much seafood that
Yeah.
they would all have mercury poisoning if they didn't.
Right.
So it's natural selection.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I didn't know that. So that's really fascinating.
Yeah, so just I want to point out what you're saying that you are actually very low in selenium. You're lower in
Really?
selenium than you are in molybdenum, so you need
Oh,
to up your
wow.
intake. And you can see it right here in these results.
Oh wow. And
Selenium is that line.
wow. And is there such thing as I mean, I imagine there has to be such thing as over-consuming selenium too, right? Like
Yes.
how many Brazil nuts, for example, would be too many?
That's now you're starting to get into dietitian level stuff,
Yeah.
which is a little bit out of my scope. That's why I have Coach Kyle
Yeah,
to
for sure.
do nutrition supplementation for patients.
Yeah.
You could probably double what you're taking.
Okay.
And that's what I think the most important thing is. There's no one answer fits all patients. We do testing, see
Yeah.
where you're at, and then adjust from there.
Right.
So you're taking 2 a day, and it's not enough. So we can increase you.
Wow. Okay. Fascinating. All right. Well, I'm gonna start taking maybe 3 or 4 Brazil nuts a day and
Yeah.
See how I feel.
And then once you get through 10 chelation treatments, we're going to retest you again just to get a ratio of how fast you're coming down.
Yeah.
And then we'll get an idea of how high your selenium is at that point. And
Yeah.
then from there, we can adjust again.
Yeah. And so, I mean, look, I also I had some questions for you about lead. I don't know how I'm doing there, but
Yeah.
you know, I grew up fishing almost every single day of my life, and I handled lead weights. There's lead, you know, all over our modern environments, right? So I'm curious how I'm doing on that end.
So once again, we'll let the camera see, the audience see before we get your reaction to it. I got to keep this fun for myself.
Yeah.
So,
Fair enough. All right.
okay, ready? Big
Yeah.
reveal. Lead is the
Don't
longest
t-
bar
oh
across.
my gosh.
So he's high in lead.
Of course. Of
His
course.
lead is 8.9. I typically start treating at a lead of 5, but my average lead patient is between 10 and 15. So you're below average.
Okay.
You're good there.
Wow.
This is so much lower priority for you than the mercury is that we're going to ignore this for a long time and only
Okay.
focus on your mercury treatments.
And is the stuff that we're doing for mercury going to benefit the lead as well?
Not really. So
What
that's
about
why
the selenium or molybdenum? Does that compete with lead as well?
no, lead mostly competes with calcium, boron, and a couple other things.
So basically, you mentioned I think manganese and boron, and what else did you mention? Copper. So I imagine eating dates is a good idea.
Yeah, just to try and up your mineral content with all of this stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're deficient. So what's cool about the EDTA test, it's better at analyzing your elementals, your minerals basically. So you can see you actually have too much of the, let's
Oh
say,
wow, of iron, really interesting. What do I need to? I know that I have a predisposition for hereditary. Well, that's redundant at that point. For hemochromatosis, so
Yeah.
I store too much iron.
yeah, you do.
Yeah.
It's very, you can see you're 364 times your regular morning iron, whereas
Holy shit.
yeah, let me find the packet. So what's cool, I can't memorize all this.
So does that mean I need to go on a vegan diet? What does this mean?
You basically need to chelate.
Yeah. What about donating blood?
You can donate blood, but your problem is, as
I
you
love
see,
donating blood.
it's not in your blood. That's the problem. You do an iron test, your iron levels are normal. It's trapped inside your tissue, and that's the problem with hemochromatosis. It's
Oh,
not that it's
wow.
in your blood; it gets stored in your tissue improperly.
So what do I do about that?
EDTA.
Okay.
So you can see how much it's pulling out 364 times how much you're excreting on your own. So we just
Yeah.
do a series of those to lower your iron levels.
Right.
So
Andres, how are you feeling? Feeling anything?
Really good. Yeah, I mean, this is all very mind blowing. So it's just kind of trying to wrap my head around it all while simultaneously, you know, hosting a podcast, and I definitely feel like I have 2 IVs in my arm. You know, so it's just a wild thing to try to describe. But I feel great. I'm very excited. I mean, it's so nice to have clarity on, you know, what's going on in your body, discovering your science. That's what we're all about. This is the mission coming to life. This is why we do what we do. And to have someone like Dr. K here to guide us through it, such a practical, you know, way is really a gift and a huge privilege and honor, to say the least. So, you know, thanks again for having us here and for taking us through all this. This is really life-changing.
absolutely, yeah. I'm happy that you brought me on because my whole purpose of the Longevity Center is to bring this out to the world, making it in an affordable way so that people can afford to come do this and change their lives.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I
so-
mean, I didn't think that I could feel so much better than I already did.
Yeah.
And in just one round of chelation, I feel at least 10% more clear, more energized, more focused. And here we are discussing what the next 40 rounds of chelation are going to look like because my levels were just that high.
Yeah.
So imagine how much better I can feel.
Yeah. And now, really, I pointed this out earlier. I want to point it out again. You live a very fine-tuned lifestyle.
Yeah.
The average person with this mercury, they don't feel good on a day-to-day. They have a lot of fatigue, a lot of anxiety,
Yeah.
maybe even gut issues. And so when they go through chelation, it's utterly life-changing. They start to feel like how you do now.
Yeah. Wow. And what about the iron?
So iron, I would guess you probably need to back off on how much red meat you're eating.
Now, I have, ever since I got that genetic test done, I definitely did. I also learned that, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I took medication for it. And, the issue there, really the root cause is, what are you pointing to?
The root cause is your mercury.
Yeah, well, the mercury, but also because, I was diagnosed when I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
Right? But I understand that this has to do with the substantia nigra and the basal ganglia.
Yep.
And if you have, hemochromatosis and you store too much iron, especially in that area of the brain, it can seriously exacerbate the symptoms, and it can lead to early onset Alzheimer's.
Yep.
And Parkinson's specifically, which I also am genetically predisposed for.
Okay.
When I learned that a couple of years ago after my genetic test, that scared the living shit out of me.
Yeah.
I learned this while I was on a road trip with my friends in Colorado. We were going up a mountain that we were about to hike. We were pulling up to the campsite to start hiking, and I got these results. Terrible timing to open this up and read through the results. And guess what I did? Immediately I called one of my mentors, Dr. Wesley Smith, who's the head of nutrition and physiology at the University of Miami, and I was almost like crying to him, like asking for help with barely any service. We were breaking up on the phone. I was freaking out, having like a panic and anxiety attack. And basically he was like, "Look, man, you're going to be okay,
Yeah.
Then I called a friend of mine who specializes in Parkinson's, and she laughed at me. She's like, "Andres, you're the living, breathing example of exactly what every person who is predisposed or has Parkinson's needs to do to delay or revert the disease state." But now, dude, I learned this, and I'm like scared, but also very excited.
Yeah, this is the next chapter of basically your healthy living journey.
Yeah.
And so what the cool part about chelation is it's not like an ongoing thing for life. You get through your treatments, and then what I tell people is you treat it like a routine colonoscopy. Every few years, you come get retested, make sure you're not creeping up. If you're not, we leave you alone. We don't make you do chelation the rest of your life.
Right.
And so it's a chapter of your life that once you're closed, you're going to feel amazing the rest of your life.
Right. And how common would you say, heavy metals, like how many people have an issue with heavy metals and it's just like totally undiagnosed, or maybe they're just so used to living their life and feeling this way that they don't even think that it could be heavy metals? Like how common is this toxicity?
So the problem is I think it's more common than we let on. And the big gap we have is if you go to your doctor and say, "Hey, is mercury bad for me?" They'll say, "Yes, it is." But if you go to them and say, "Hey, I got exposed to mercury, what do I do?" They say, "Oh, nothing, it'll go away, don't worry about it." Because traditional doctors, unfortunately, aren't trained in how to deal with heavy metals and chelation. That's something I did specialty training in to learn how to treat people. And so I think there's a lot of people walking around there that are undiagnosed with it, and no one can figure out why they have chronic fatigue or anxiety or gut issues or
But
thyroid
they present
issues.
those symptoms,
Yep.
and the doctor will treat them in some other way, shape, or form, but they ultimately never get to that root cause, which could be heavy metals, or at the bare minimum, the heavy metals can exacerbate something else, in the body.
Exactly.
Inflammation or,
So talk about how do mainstream doctors treat mercury poisoning?
Yeah, how do mainstream doctors typically treat mercury poisoning? How do they identify it? How do they treat it?
They don't. That's the problem. So the way they do it is they'll do a blood test on you for mercury. Even if it's high, their solution is, and there's actually an article, I think it was MSNBC had a video about this. Don't quote me on the news source, but it was one of the big ones. And they went out, they had a doctor come on, and the patient came on, and the patient said, "Hey doctor, I've got a mercury of 15 in my blood. What do I do?" And the doctor said, "Oh, just stay away from seafood for a couple weeks and you'll be fine. It'll go away." And that's their entire approach.
Wow.
It'll go away.
And it doesn't.
It doesn't. You can see your results.
Yeah. I know Kyle and I were talking about how cilantro, for example, can
Yeah.
naturally chelate these heavy metals, and how in my case, for example, it can actually do more harm than good because it can just move stuff around.
Yes.
Can you elaborate and amplify on that point?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple parts to it. One, when you take a lot of these oral chelations, your body doesn't want to absorb them, so it can only chelate what's in your gut, which for some patients is a lot, for some patients is a little. Yours, I suspect, is in your brain because of how you reacted to it.
Yeah.
And so when you take spirulina,
Chlorella.
chlorella, and all that stuff, it's binding what's available on the inside of your gut, and that's it. That's part of it. The other part of it, it's not a permanent bind to mercury, so it can pick it up, and if mercury passes by something it likes better, it will detach from the spirulina and rebind to something else.
Right.
Whereas when you do chelation, it's more about permanent bind. It's forced to excrete.
Right. And of our way to chelate
Yeah.
heavy metals.
Yeah, so a big part of mercury is when they were mining for gold, they would use mercury slurries to get the gold out, and then this mercury would just wash off into our rainwater and eventually end up in the oceans. And so
Yeah.
that's how it's now spread through all of our soil, it's in our food, it's everywhere. Which
Yeah.
300 years ago, no one was mining for gold. It wasn't a thing, no one cared about it.
Yeah.
And so all this mercury was kind of just trapped away.
Yeah. So since the Industrial Revolution,
Yep.
and just general modernization, it's just been, it's ended up in our water, in our soil, in the air, in our food.
Yep.
And what about lead? Same
So,
thing. Same
Lead.
idea.
I mean, the Romans had lead pipes, and it's been going on from there. There's an interesting thing. Now I forget whether it was the poor or the wealthy in Rome, but some of them ate from lead plates, and some of them ate from, I believe it was copper plates, and because one of them was a lot more expensive to get than the other. I think the wealthy had copper, and so the lead would die, or the poor peasants basically would die from lead poisoning because they were eating off lead plates all the time, whereas the
wow.
wealthy would eat off copper and live longer.
Oh wow.
So, elaborate on that. What is in Roman times? What did lead do to the body?
So lead causes lead poisoning, and we all know lead poisoning is bad. We all know lead poisoning is bad. That's why all kids in America get tested for lead at age 3
Yeah.
because it can significantly stunt development of your brain, of your bones, of a lot of your organs.
Wow. And so do you think that, I mean, I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 8 years old, right? And my dad has similar symptoms and issues with his focus, and but do you think that exposure to lead early on could be the reason why I had a diagnosis, or do you think mostly it's like a genetic predisposition?
I hope your mom doesn't listen to this show because
She does.
So oftentimes your first exposure to heavy metals is from the mother.
Okay.
Moms can pass heavy metals to their babies while they're pregnant. And so that's usually your first exposure.
I would love to bring my family here.
Yeah, I
You
think
know,
that'd
we
be
eat
very cool.
almost identical food, and when I do an awesome spearfishing trip like the one I'm going to do next week with hyperoxygenated blood and a longer breath hold,
Yep.
I always bring that home and I share it with my family, my mom, everyone in my family. We get together and cook, and cooking is just such an important part. One of our, if not our number one core values of family, is getting together to share meals.
Yeah.
And fish has been at the forefront of our experience cooking. I mean,
Yep.
everyone in my every man in my family is a die-hard fisherman,
Okay.
except my brother. He's a musician. Except my brother. We're all die-hard fishermen. So there's been a lot of fish, and therefore heavy metals, that we've been exposed to throughout our entire lifespan.
So here's where it gets really interesting. Someone pointed this out to me, and it's made perfect sense ever since. We're in roughly the 4th to 5th generation since the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
And so what happens is moms pass the babies over and over and over. And so that's where this arise of things like ADHD and other psychiatric things are coming from, is that we're finally reaching a bioavailability concentration of mercury that's high enough to trigger these problems.
Wow.
Generation 1, maybe some of them got affected, but not most. Generation 2, slightly more.
Right. It starts
more.
bioaccumulating, period.
Yeah.
And it
so
gets passed on.
we've reached that tipping point now where more people than not will be affected by their level.
Holy shit. So we're going to flirt with the borders of controversy here. Little disclaimer. This might be a bit controversial.
Yeah. Truthfully, it's money gets involved. There's not a lot of money to be made on chelation. It's a couple $100. You can't patent it. It's been around for so long. But there's other things that we can treat patients with heart disease with that creates a lot of money. heart caths and stents and statins and blood pressure meds. All these things rack up to millions and billions of dollars.
Wow.
Whereas chelation, a couple $100.
Wow. What a fucking shame.
Yeah.
We need to start doing better as a country.
Yeah.
I think you and I share similar political views.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think most people tuning in could probably figure out what that is.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it at that.
Yep.
But oh my gosh, I am crossing my fingers, and I hope that in 12 days we change the trajectory of our health, well-being, and longevity as we know it.
Yeah.
There's some key players in place that can really help us do that.
That would be amazing if that happened, a big shift in the medical system. I think, unfortunately, COVID, it opened up a lot of people's eyes that maybe what you're being told by, big pharma, big government, isn't the best thing for your general being. It keeps the country running, and it keeps the country moving, but as an individual person, it's probably not the best thing to be doing.
Yeah.
Like, remember when they were having people stand 6 feet apart, and they came out and said, hey, actually, that's not really a thing. We made that up.
Yeah.
And they had people washing packages that got delivered.
Yeah.
How did any of that make sense?
Yeah. Oh man. Wow. Shift gears and speak on the actual mechanisms of action and these chelation IVs. Like, how are they going in and binding to these tissues? Like, what's actually happening there?
Yeah, so it's like we talked about, it's a key and hole system where mercury and molybdenum, they have the same, basically, teeth keys that can plug into the hole that your body's looking for to plug in.
Yeah.
And mercury is smaller and lighter than molybdenum, so it gets preferentially picked up and
Wow.
plugged into your tissue. And molybdenum gets excreted because your body can't tell the difference and just thinks you have too much molybdenum. It doesn't know it's mercury.
Right.
And the same thing happens with all of the heavy metals. All of them have an element that they compete with.
Okay. And so, but like the EBDTA or EBTA, what is
EDTA.
it? EDTA. Okay. So what's in there and what's it actually doing? Is it similar to molybdenum?
No. So EDTA, let me talk about the mercury DMPS one. It's just a little bit easier to explain it.
Yeah.
The DMPS with the mercury on its basically butt end has thiol bonds that it can attach to. And the thiol bond is more of a, we're getting super chemistry here.
That's fine. That's
Okay.
what the show's about.
Awesome.
Let's do
so
it.
it's a dual, so mercury will attach to any thiol bond. And it has the ability to attach to one or two. And so DMPS has 2 available thiol bonds for it. So if it binds to something with one thiol group, like spirulina, it can then, something else, the other thiol bond is still available, and it can
wow.
break off and attach.
Oh, wow.
When it binds to DMPS, it's got 2 thiol bonds, so its receptors are full, and it's
locked
fully,
in.
Yep, it's locked in.
We're here to locking in our mercury to, what is it, EBPS?
EDTA,
Yeah, EDTA, and then the other one?
DMPS.
DMPS.
You
Nice.
know, through 40 of these treatments, you'll get it.
Oh yeah, I'll get it. It'll be like clockwork. Okay, and so it's binding to these, thanks to the thiol bond, and then they stick together, and
Yep.
then you can excrete it.
Yeah, because once it's bound to the DMPS, it's stuck in your bloodstream.
And
you're-
it can't bind to anything else. It can't bind to any cells. So boom.
Correct. You're forced to excrete it through your urine.
Okay.
Mostly urine, some stool.
Okay. And what if you hooked someone up to a machine that had, EDTA or whatever, and it had an IV running all day long? Would that work, or?
You mean like basically adding EDTA to the Eboo filter that
Yeah,
you're
like
doing right
why-
now?
Yeah. Instead of having to come in for so many sessions, is there?
Yeah, it doesn't. The problem is it needs to go through your bloodstream, through your body, because it's not in your blood, it's in your tissue. So the blood needs to interact with your tissue so the EDTA
Right.
can hit
It's
it
not
and
that
bind
simple.
it.
It needs to take its time to actually get in there,
Yep.
pull it out, and then excrete it.
Yes.
Okay.
So we run this thing basically for an hour. You're getting pretty close to that hour, so
Cool.
we can continue the podcast. I'm just gonna have to pause and unplug you for a second.
Okay.
Basically, there's 3 commercial generators. You can just buy a pre-made Eboo system. And I'm not gonna name any names. I'm not gonna say anything bad about anyone. But basically, I found, in my opinion, that there was something wrong with each of those 3 Eboo commercial machines out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I based mine on the Malaysian protocol. Eboo came out of Malaysia like 30 years ago.
Why?
And
Why? Why was it made?
The guy that invented it just lives in Malaysia. His name is I won't say his name actually.
Like, what's the purpose? What was the original purpose of
So
this machine?
IV ozone has been around for a very long time, right? Nikola Tesla had the first medicinal grade ozone generator, and he would sell them. That's how long this has been around, 100 years. And basically, we're just always looking to advance our treatments, right? So ozone, when you do regular ozone treatments, especially if you do multi-pass or major, your bag or your bottle gets really gunky and nasty looking. Have you ever done IV ozone before?
No.
Okay, so your bottle gets really gunky looking. It's fibrinogen and other toxins in there. And as you do those ozone treatments, you just pass that gunk out of you, we treat it, and then we put it right back in you. With Eboo, we're filtering it off, so it never passes back into you. So all those Herxheimer effects that you can hear about with ozone, I don't really get with my Eboo system because I've tuned it to avoid herxing.
Wow. What was that process like?
About 2 years, I would say. I'm pretty close to perfect with it now. It's been about 2 years since I started doing it. I've done hundreds, plural, of treatments. It's myself, and I have another friend out in Australia. He bought all the parts, I bought all the parts, and we just talk on the phone all the time until we kind of tuned it.
Okay. Typically I start the show by asking my guest why they do what they do.
Yep.
So, I feel like I need to ask you this question after the fact because this is absolutely fucking wild.
Yeah.
And what kind of license do you need to get to create something like this and hook someone up to it?
Yeah. So.
Now that we've seen it and what it can do, why don't you tell us why you started doing what you do, man?
Yeah. So I'll answer your question in reverse order.
Okay.
You want a doctor on site. Unfortunately, and nurses are very well qualified, nurse practitioners are very well qualified. And this machine, it runs really easy, right? I haven't touched it at all since we started.
Yeah.
That's because I can tell how well this is running just by sound because I've done so many of them.
Okay.
And if something goes wrong, I know how to fix it easily.
Right.
But when I first started, my first couple of treatments, I literally shot blood across the room because I didn't know what I was doing. And so, I would miss a clamp, I'd turn on the wrong thing at the wrong time, and it'd overpressurize or underpressurize, and things would go wrong. And so, you have great veins, things are moving really smoothly for you. For patients with bad veins, this doesn't move smoothly at all.
It sounds, you can hear the sound is different.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's just for me. That pump especially, and just all the noises the machines are making, all the hums, I can hear when it changes because it's not getting enough blood or too much blood or whatever's wrong with it.
Oh, wow.
So you want a doctor that's familiar with this thing to be on site actually monitoring your treatment.
Right.
And that's my opinion on it.
How many of these have you done? How many sessions?
As far as I know, I've done more than almost anyone in America. I've only met one person that got to do more than me, and that's because he was part of the clinical trials with it.
Okay.
I've done, best guess now, probably 600-700 of them.
Wow.
The last 2 years.
Wow. And so how did you get started? I mean, what drives your passion and your obsession with this stuff?
Absolutely.
What started all this?
Yeah, so basically my whole story is I've wanted to be a doctor since I was little. My dad, he's not a doctor, but he does craniosacral therapy up in New Jersey. So when I first went to medical school, I didn't really have like a clear idea of what I wanted to do. I was like, maybe I'll do cardiology or surgery, something. I just knew I wanted to be a doctor. And then as I was getting through med school, I was like, maybe I'll just go back to New Jersey and do osteopathic manipulation with him. And then halfway through med school, they sent me to a hospital in Miami for rotations where I met the doctor that I used to work for. And I met him and I followed him around for a month. And then I had really bad TMJ and I had neck issues. So I got into this actually because of stem cells. We put stem cells in my jaw, we did PRP in my neck, and that was the first relief I'd had in years. And the chronic headaches went away, the jaw pain went away. Mm-hmm. And so I followed him around for another month. He also does all of this stuff. So I learned from him how to do chelation, how to do ozone. And then I realized the big need, there's a lot of doctors offering stem cells out there, and I still offer it, and I like to think I'm quite good at that stuff. But the need is chelation and ozone treatments for heavy metals and mold being done well and properly. And that's where the big need is.
And in a cost-effective way as well.
Yes. I'm not scared to put my prices out there because I know I'm one of the cheaper people in the country because I'm willing to...
More inexpensive, not cheaper.
Yeah, more inexpensive. I like that.
Yeah.
Because I'm willing to take a lower margin to make sure that people can actually heal.
Yeah.
So, I'm doing chelation for $200. And I'm doing full dose...
Session.
Yeah, a session. Full dose, full strength chelation for $200. almost anyone else offering for that price is unfortunately giving you a half dose. So they get to, you know, split a bottle between 2 patients or stuff like that.
Wow.
The next cheapest place, I think it's
More inexpensive.
yes. So I'm 800. The next most inexpensive place is I think $1,200 or $1,300.
Yeah.
And then from there it goes really it starts about 2,000 and goes up per treatment.
And these are machines that are not as sophisticated as this one.
Correct. There are a few. I'm not the only one to have built my own. There was a guy that you could actually take his course and learn how to build your own.
Wow.
Very few people took him up on it and actually followed through on it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Mad scientists.
So I got him.
Borderline sociopathic.
No, not at all. We're here to help people.
100%. I'm just making a joke.
No, last October I got invited out to speak at StopCon, which was basically like the national Eboo convention. All the people doing Eboo
Oh my
got invited
gosh,
to
I
come
love
to this
that.
thing. And that's kind of where I
Was
learned.
Dexter there?
Who?
Dexter Morgan?
He was not there. No, very funny. He would love this thing. But no, that's where I learned, you know, I would hear patients or doctors talking about how their patients have this problem or this problem. And people would look at me and be like, you've done so many of these. Do you have these problems? And I'd be like, honestly, no. I've only had maybe 5 people ever have a problem with Eboo.
And what were those problems?
A couple were truly psychosomatic, as in they did Eboo and they were just so convinced that they were sick and nothing could ever help them that they just basically drove themselves into an anxiety attack.
During the Eboo?
No, afterwards.
Okay.
I did have 2 Herxheimer reactions. Out of 700, I've had 2 Herxheimer reactions. And those people, they were some of the sickest patients I've ever had. So I'm not surprised. And actually, both of them continued with treatment. As they did more and more treatments, the Herxheiming went away, and they actually started to feel better with the Eboos.
Wow.
So what's that?
So this is all of the fluid, or basically inflammatory water that came out of Andreas.
It looks pretty clean.
It should always look clear.
Okay.
If you go somewhere and your inflammatory waste, if you go somewhere and your inflammatory waste is anything but clear, they're hemolyzing your blood.
Which is not good.
Hemolyzing blood means breaking it down and destroying it.
Okay.
So you always want to have clear waste.
All right. But there's another bag of waste we're going to pull out of here.
No, this is it.
Oh, that's it?
This is your
Okay.
waste.
Oh, wow.
So you pulled out, it's about 1/4 of a pound of just water he was carrying around. And it's off one treatment. If you do multiple of these treatments, I guess he would pull out about this much every time.
Wow.
So we're constantly just de-inflaming you.
So what happens if I drink that?
You'd probably throw up, honestly.
It's nasty.
I can't even imagine what this would taste like. But what's funny is he's not the first person to ask that.
Yeah, really?
I was thinking,
All right. So now tell us about the heavy metals in vaccines and just the facts.
Yeah.
you know.
So the fact is that the way a vaccine is supposed to work is we inject you with a dead virus. Your body attacks it, learns what its weaknesses are, and learns how to kill it. We can all agree with that, right?
Okay.
The problem is, if I inject you with a dead virus, your body simply won't care. There's nothing for it to do. It's already dead. We can agree with that statement, right?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
This is all just basic facts about it. The last fact is we need an immune stimulating component to basically trigger your immune system to attack the dead virus, okay? You know what one of the best immune stimulating components is?
Heavy metals.
Heavy metals, that's right. Mercury, aluminum, graphene oxide, basically any heavy metal triggers inflammation, immune response, and your body ends up attacking that virus. So they have to put in heavy metals to make the vaccine work.
And they stay in your body.
They stay in your body.
Wow. So even my dog could benefit from this this company you mentioned, the
My
paleo
Paleo
company?
Pet?
Yeah. Because he got his round of vaccines and now he has heavy metals that we can pull out.
Yeah, what's interesting, so when I was doing that with my dog, I could visibly tell that the days I gave it to her, and I would only give it to her once a week, the days I gave it to her, she was tired all day in the beginning. And eventually, as we got towards the end of the bottle of it, she stopped reacting to it.
Wow. Oh man, and I don't know if you're familiar with the EWG website and the
Yeah,
tap
of course.
water database. You know, I wanted to ask you, how accurate is that? And
I think
is there any tap water that's safe to drink?
no, tap water is not safe to drink. Go on there, look up your
But
zip
why
code.
is that? Why is it legal to? How is that legal?
Why was there no federal limit on the amount of lead allowed in our food?
Yeah.
Did you hear about that with the baby food?
Can you tell us? Can you remind us on
Yeah.
the show?
So it was a company, this happened earlier this year, a company got flagged by the state of California for having too much lead in their applesauce. It was cinnamon flavored applesauce. And when the FDA investigated, their first answer was, well, there's no federal limit on the amount of lead allowed in food. And so as the FDA investigated further, a whistleblower actually came out and said, well, there was monetary involvement. Lead is sweet. Lead is also cheaper than sugar.
And there's lead in the cinnamon.
There's lead in the cinnamon supplier that was in the applesauce. And the applesauce companies just didn't care. They knew and did not care.
That's just the world that we live in.
Yeah. And the other one, did you hear about the, it was baby oat, I forget the company, baby oat cereal, like cereal for babies made out of oats, had like 4 times the amount of glyphosate allowed.
Wow.
Babies.
That's our future.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
And I want to state that, we're not shooting this podcast to fearmonger, but this is just how fucked up. These are just the facts.
Yeah.
Excuse my French, but it really frustrates me how incredibly dangerous and toxic this world is, just living your life.
Yeah.
Your body just can't handle this
No.
toxic load that we're under.
And so props to Consumer Reports, who over the last year have been going out and testing all sorts of different industries. This is a major magazine that's going out and saying, hey, chocolate has heavy metal burdens, protein powders have heavy metal burdens. So they're out there and putting this into the public.
Yeah.
So it's no longer like behind closed doors, underground stuff. This is public knowledge now.
Yeah. Wow. Do you think that there's ever going to be a reality where we can live our lives, and handle the toxic load that we're under because maybe it's lower? Or is there any way to undo the damage that we've done and just live our lives as regular human beings and not have to go out of our way chelating and doing Eboo to feel better about ourselves?
I think that if all these toxins were banned over a few generations, the world would clean up. The earth is really good at cleaning itself. For example, kale, this new wonder vegetable that everyone's eating. What kale is really, really good at? Cleaning soil. It's really good at pulling all the toxins into itself out of the soil.
And so then you eat the toxins in the kale?
Well, now that's what, I don't know why everyone's eating kale. I would never eat kale.
Really?
No. Kale and actually marijuana plants are both really good at soil cleaning.
Really?
Yeah.
So smoking weed, you're smoking heavy metals, or?
Yeah, heavy metals, and actually a lot of mold is in weed as well.
Really? Mm-hmm. Wow. And something else I wanted to talk to you about. You mentioned this when we first met. How typically when you have heavy metals and the symptoms that I described, brain fog and fatigue, that typically there's parasites involved as well.
Yes.
And you told me about some kind of biofilm around the parasites. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so what happens is the way molds and parasites survive in the body is they create a biofilm around themselves. This is not groundbreaking news. This is not anything very fancy. Everyone knows about this. Biofilm is a protein shield around the mold, and it typically carries a charge. The problem is mold shouldn't be able to charge themselves in nature. It's not something they should be able to do. So what they found is that the fungus and molds will anchor themselves to heavy metals, borrow the charge from them, and build their biofilm to repel antifungals. And so until you chelate and remove the heavy metals, you can never fully clear the mold. Or if you do somehow fully clear out the mold, you can always be re-exposed and they'll immediately rebind to you.
So these bad guys team up to do more damage in your body.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you guys believe this? This is just mind-boggling and very, it worries me, and it worries me about the future of, my kids and their generations, I don't see the world getting better.
No, sadly, if we keep going the way we're going, it's only getting worse.
How common should therapies like these be? I mean, in an ideal world, at least, the world as we know it now.
In an ideal world, your primary care offers this stuff in their office.
Yeah. Wow. And can a primary care physician offer something like this, or
technically
do they have to have a background like yours, or?
So technically, I'm family medicine boarded. That was my initial training was in family medicine. Mm-hmm. It's just I chose to go into all of this stuff instead of practicing quote unquote traditional medicine.
Yeah.
Any doctor can do this. They just need to go through the training and learn. It's scary, nothing to be afraid of.
No, initially I was like, what the hell am I doing?
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I feel great.
Yeah,
I feel
awesome.
like I almost feel like I got another shot of espresso or something, I just feel, great.
Hyperoxygenation.
Yeah.
It's.
I'm really excited to see this play out in my spearfishing trip.
Yeah. The last thing I'll leave us on, like oxygen bars, we go and like, get 100% oxygen for a few minutes and it makes you feel really heady and good. Now we did that, but like 1,000 times stronger.
Yeah, and you mentioned how, compared to like beetroot powders and other nitric oxide boosting compounds, that this is like significantly better. I think you gave me an exact percentage or.
I said
multiple.
hyperbaric.
Hyperbaric, right?
Yeah, it boosts you up by like roughly 3 to 5%.
Right.
This boosts you up by like 30%. And I'm talking about oxygen packed in per red blood cell.
So I can, maybe even tonight, I can monitor my resting heart rate and it should technically be lower.
Yeah.
Because my, the AVO2 difference is higher.
Yep.
Right?
I would expect that, yeah.
Okay.
Paul.
Nice, man. Well, Dr. K, it's been an honor and pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll be back soon for more chelation, and I can't wait to show you the amazing fish and dive times that I accomplished with this, hyperoxygenated blood cell.
I love it. We're
That's all
bartering
I've got.
fish for chelation, right?
For sure. I can't guarantee that it's going to be low heavy metal, high selenium therapeutic index fish. It's going to be larger wahoo, probably have heavier, more heavy metals, but.
You know what's funny? Patients ask me all the time, like, should I not eat tuna? Should I not eat swordfish?
Yeah.
And my answer is always, I can chelate you far faster than you get mercury into yourself.
Nice.
So if I have to do one extra chelation a year and keep and eat whatever I want, that's how I live my life.
Beautiful.